2017, the city of Guangzhou donated this sculpture to Bristol to celebrate the twinning of the two cities. It was placed in the Chinese herb garden. It's a sculpture of the flower of the city, the K-pop flower. We decided that this is a good opportunity to expand the Chinese herb garden into a more cultural aspect. Flower symbolism is very important in China, and also many of the medicinal plants started as medicinal plants and became very strong cultural emblems. The site for the Chinese herb garden was chosen because of this wonderful female ginkgo tree. It's very rare to have a female ginkgo, certainly one of this size. And although this is a large tree, it's really still a baby. It's about 100 years old, and they live to about 2,000 years old, so it's still in primary school. In China, they're revered for their longevity, and they're often planted in monasteries, you'll see them. And these monasteries are in even older shamanic sites. So some of the trees in China do reach 1,500 years old. This 1,400-year-old temple ginkgo drew visitors from all over China. In the autumn, the ginkgo is admired for the shedding of its yellow leaves. They call it the golden rain. Although the ginkgo represents long life, it also reminds us of impermanence. We are also treated to this golden shower in Bristol. Normally, a ginkgo forms a tall, narrow tree, as it's what's called a colonizer plant. These are the first to colonize new ground and rapidly grow upwards to avoid being shaded. Not only do they live a long time, but the ginkgo has a very long history on Earth, earning it the title as a living fossil. Fossil records show that relatives of the ginkgo have been alive since Permian times, around 270 million years ago. In the Permian period, all the continents were joined as a supercontinent of Pangaea. The small red shape you can see is the position of the UK landmass. Then we were positioned on the equator. During the Permian, the climate altered dramatically from the swampy Carboniferous period, dominated by ferns, to a much drier desert as found in our large sandstone rocks today. The plants needed to evolve for a drier habitat, and the ginkgo was the first to do this. Signs of the ancient ginkgo past can be seen in the leaves. If you look at the leaf veins, you can see a distinctive pattern that tells of its past. The ginkgo leaf has what's termed a dichotomous vein pattern. This means that the veins keep dividing into two branches of equal length. It's a very early leaf pattern, seen in seed ferns and cycads. More recent plants, such as this peony leaf, have a reticulate or net-like pattern of leaf veins. Another link with ferns is seen in the reproduction of ginkgo. Ginkgos are separate male and female trees with different reproductive parts. They're not obvious. This is the female. Ginkgos rely on the wind for reproduction. There were few insects around at this time. It would be over 100 million years before bees evolved. The female reproductive receptor is on a small stalk between the leaves. It's composed of ovules which are exposed directly to the air. This makes the ginkgo one of the earliest gymnosperm plants. The name gymnosperm literally means naked seed. In more modern plants, the ovule cells are enclosed by a protective ovary wall. These later plants are called angiosperms, which means enclosed seed. We'll see an example of this later in the peony. There are thousands of male ginkgo trees planted as street trees all over the UK. They produce a different structure to fertilize the female, but you have to be quick and observant to see them. The inconspicuous male parts appear for one night only. By daylight they've dropped off, and all you see is them lying on the ground. The male doesn't produce pollen but spores more similar to ferns, and like fern spores, they need moisture. When a male spore is blown onto a female, it needs to swim a short distance on the damp surface to reach the ovule cell, which will then become the seed. This is probably why it flowers at night. Pollen evolved later to adapt plants to even drier conditions. There's sometimes a tendency to label these as primitive plants, as somehow inferior to modern plants, but in fact they're best viewed as ancient. In their day they were state-of-the-art, and they still have attributes not seen in many modern plants. For example, ginkgo DNA has around 40,000 genes, compared to around 20,000 in the human. Some of these may be obsolete, but it's thought that they may give the tree its tremendous ability to regenerate and provide protection from all forms of attack. The ginkgo tree is tolerant of all forms of pollution and environmental stress. Ginkgo trees 1 kilometre from the atomic blast at Hiroshima started to sprout new growth within months. The ginkgo also has a serious chemical armoury to avoid attack. After fertilization, the female produces what's often called a fruit. In fact, it's not a fruit, but a hard seed with a soft outer layer. The soft coating turns yellow and falls with the leaves. It then quickly decomposes, causing a nauseating smell caused by butyric acid. It's this chemical which also causes skin allergies, and because of this, it's forbidden to grow female ginkgos in a public place. When you remove this soft coating, you find the hard part of the seed. This again has several layers of defense built inside it, and you only find them when you open the shell. The nut inside is surrounded by a thin brown coating. You can see this on the inside of the shell. This coating contains toxic cyanide compounds, and the nut itself, especially when germinated, contains equally toxic phenol chemicals. In the raw state, the ginkgo nut is poisonous, and too many could actually kill you. The seed of the ginkgo is clearly designed to resist being eaten, so it's a bit surprising to see it served as a food in China. The inside kernel is detoxified by boiling and removing the brown outer coating, and then becomes known as ginkgo nuts. The boiling makes them safer to eat, but the phenolic compounds are not completely destroyed by boiling. Even as a food, there's a limit to how many should be eaten. On this packet of ginkgo nuts, it states only 8 should be eaten a day, and only 4 if under 16 years old. The ginkgo seed is also used in medicine. For this, it's normally toasted to open the seed. They're then pulverized and then boiled. They're given in a low-dose formulas for lung weakness and wheezing with phlegm. These are the same medical conditions approved by the Imperial Academy in the Song dynasty 1,000 years ago. The Imperial Academy represented the highest academic authority at the time. One of its functions was to validate and approve herbs for medicinal use. They also noted that you should avoid inhaling the steam when boiling ginkgo seed, so they were aware of the potential toxicity at that time. Some people know of ginkgo from products sold in health stores as ginkgo leaf to improve memory. The leaves do have some history in TCM as a herb to move the blood, but they fell out of use as the action was considered to be too mild, and other herbs were more effective. You'll notice that most of these products state that they are standardized extracts. This means that the key chemical thought to be responsible for its medicinal action has been concentrated by a fixed amount. We saw this with Hypericum in the East-West video. In the case of ginkgo, this is based on a flavone glycoside, which is standardized at 24%. In order to reach this level of 24% concentration, you have to concentrate the leaves by 50 times. That means this amount of leaf here is made into this tablet here. So there's 50 times the amount of concentrate as in the raw leaves. This makes it a pharmaceutical product rather than a traditional medicine product. And for that reason, I can't really validate whether these claims are correct or not. It relies on scientific studies which are slightly debated at the moment. It's not really traditional medicine. We're here in the peony garden in the Chinese culture garden. This was the first of the Chinese culture garden areas to be built in 2019. It's very small compared to some of the Chinese peony gardens, but it tells a very big story, not just the peonies in China, but around the world. And we're trying to tell this story with these particular cultivars. The tree peony in China is known as mudan. It's the national flower of China. It's appreciated not just for its beauty, but also symbolically for its imagery, and also as a very important medicinal plant. During the Tang dynasty, emperors in China assumed great importance to themselves and to the population. The tree peony was adopted by the emperor to symbolize wealth and high rank. The first mudan blooms were sent as a tribute to the emperor to acknowledge their supreme rank. Empress Wu is said to have banished the mudan from her court for failing to flower on time. It then became more widespread in the general population. The mudan continues to hold this symbolic meaning. It's a common gift at a wedding or opening of a business to promote wealth and success. The tree peony flower began to feature in paintings in the 6th century. It was sometimes combined with the magnolia flower, which symbolizes purity. combining power with purity of heart, then you have the model for the perfect emperor. The first Mudan tree peony specimen to reach Europe was in 1650 from Guangzhou by the Dutch East India Company. It was over 100 years later, in 1780, before Robert Fortune introduced new cultivars from Shanghai. They were originally thought to be a single species, which was labelled Peony subfructicosa, but we've since learnt that they're all hybrids created from about 6 wild species. Depending on the location, different local peony species have been used to create hybrids, which are all collectively known as Peony subfructicosa. The layout of tree peonies in this peony garden reflects 4 regions in China which are famous for different Mudan tree peony flower cultivars. The different regions reflect different climatic conditions and wild species. In the far northwest, shown in yellow, the climate's relatively cold, being in the foothills of the Himalaya mountains. In the northeast, shown in green, the climate is warm and damp from the sea. In the far southwest, shown in blue, the climate is too warm for the northern subfructicosa hybrids, so has lesser importance in this way. The red group in the central Yangtze Basin is the region where the capitals of China existed during the Tang dynasty. This is the epicenter of tree peony cultivation. It's known as the Central Plains Group. We've laid out the tree peonies according to the different locations shown on the map. So on the right we have the Northwest Group, also known as Gansu Mudan from the Himalayas. This is the Central Plains Group, and this area I'm in now is the Eastern Group, next to the sea. And then behind at the back we have the area shown in blue, which is the Southwest Group. We're going to start in the Central Plains group of tree peonies. This is where tree peony cultivation started, and this is where most of the famous cultivars, hundreds of cultivars, were produced in this area, including these beautiful peonies on my right and left. Many parts in China hold elaborate peony festivals in the spring, but none more so than at Luoyang, which displays over 300 Central Plains cultivars. The flowers are appreciated for their range of colours, but also for their flower form. Mudan peony flowers are classified into 8 categories according to the number and arrangement of the petals. The simplest category is the single form, with relatively few petals and normal reproductive structures. Double flowers have more petals and are subdivided into lotus, chrysanthemum, rose and anemone forms, according to their appearance. The third division are the proliferate group with many petals. They are again divided into globular, crown and golden circle. To fully understand how the different flower forms are created, we need to look very closely at the structure of the peony flower. A single peony flower is composed of 3 main parts: the outer petals, the yellow male part, or stamens, with the yellow or anthers at the end, which produce pollen, and the inner, female carpels, containing ovule, which forms the seed when fertilized by the pollen. The evolution of the modern flower is a matter of debate. One theory is that petals evolved from the leaves and that the male and female parts evolved from petals. You can see the ovules in the center of this peony flower enclosed in a hard ovary wall. This is in contrast with the gymnosperm ginkgo, where they were unprotected. It indicates the peony is an angiosperm, which literally means enclosed seed. This means the peony developed later in the evolution timeline than the ginkgo, but exactly when is the subject of debate, as there are few fossil records of peony. However, there's general agreement that the peony genus is an early example of an angiosperm from the Cretaceous period, around 100 million years ago. With this understanding of the botany, we begin to see how the different flower cultivars form arise. In this typical single form, the stamens and carpels are normal. But in this double anemone form, if you look closely, you can see that some of the stamens are changing back into petals. These extra petals are called stamenoids. The same process of reversion back into petals can also occur in the female carpels in the middle of the flower. You can see it starting to happen in this photograph taken in the peony garden at Luoyang. Working from the outside of the flower to the center, you can see the outer guard petals, followed by a zone of smaller stamenoid petals, then a ring of normal yellow stamens, which makes this a rare golden circle form. In the centre you can also see some of the carpels are reverting back into petals. The reverted petals are sometimes of a different colour to the guard petals, adding to the beauty. In the most developed proliferate crown form, you can see all the stamens and carpels are reverted to make a full crown. This is sometimes referred to as a flower within a flower. We're aiming to grow as many of these different flower forms as we can in the garden, and in this Central Plains area we have a few, but we are sourcing more. This particular one is Shu Ta. Shu Ta means snowy pavilion. This is Wu Long Peng Shin, which translates as dragon holding prosperous flower. Of course, the dragon in Chinese culture is not a thing to be feared, it's a good omen. It's a double anemone form. We're here in the Northwest cultivar group, also known as the Gansu Mudan, after the province of Gansu where they're cultivated. This particular cultivar group has less cultivars than the Central Plains, but it has several advantages. Firstly, they grow very well in this country because it's cool and damp here. Secondly, they're based on Peony rockii, which is a local species which has this purple flare at the base. This gives a very dramatic appearance. Although the original Peony rockii in the wild is a white form, it is also available in these red forms. And you see the black spots in the centre exist in all forms of cultivar that have got Peony rockii present in the cultivar, even in Central Plains. If you see these black spots, it means there's some Peony rockii being introduced. This Gansu Mudan is called Xiong Mao. It's still in bud at the moment, but when it opens out you can see why it's called that. Xiong Mao translates as bear paw. You can see it resembles the paw of the panda bear. It's a beautiful proliferate crown form. This is another proliferate form known as San Hua Nu. Some peony flowers also have a delicate sweet fragrance, and this is one example. This proliferate form is called Tian Shan Ri Chu, which translates as sunrise on Tian Shan Mountains in the northwest of China. This variety of Gansu Mudan is called blended pink and white. And the reason it's called that is because it starts off very pink when it's in young bud, and it slowly changes to white as it gets older. This is a feature that's quite common in peonies, that they change colour, and it's one of the things that people like about them. The third cultivar group in the peony section is the Southwest group from the southern Himalayas. This area is a bit too warm for the northern Peony subfructicosa cultivar, so it's not so famous for that. The local wild species is this Peony Delavay, named after the missionary Marie Delavay. Now this group here is famous for another reason. It's the precursor of many of the hybrids of yellow peonies that are produced later outside China. In China they've always wanted to have a yellow peony, and as you can see, most of the cultivars from the subfructicosa group are either ranging from white to red and pink in between. Now, yellow peony is something to be prized, and this particular variety does produce a yellow flower, and it hybridizes with other of the tree peonies. So there's a potential now for producing a yellow peony. This wasn't not done in China, it was done outside China in France much later. This also comes in the red form here. Now, both of these have been used to create hybrids, as we'll see later. Now, the fourth cultivar group that we have to discuss is the Southern Yangtze group in the east of China. This is based on a different local species called Peony ostii, and you see the growth form is quite different. We only have a single form of this. It's called Fangdan. There are not so many cultivars in this, but you could argue this was the most important in terms of Chinese medicine. It's where they source a herb called Mudan Pi. Now, these peony plants have been medicines for 1,000 years before the Tang dynasty made them into cultural plants. So the medicinal use of peonies has been much older. As you can see, this is a single form of peony. There are not many doubles in this particular variety. This is the white form, but there's also a pink form. In this eastern region of China, it's cultivated as a crop, and the root is harvested for the herb Mudan Pi. The name literally means root bark of the Mudan plant. Mudan Pi has recorded use in medicine for over 2,000 years. The most common form of peony that people are used to is this herbaceous peony, which is another group of peonies altogether. They die down in the winter, but they're also very important in terms of Chinese medicine, probably more than the mudan itself. These varieties that we're going to grow here are just of the Chinese peony lactiflora. There are 30 species of herbaceous peony in the world, but we're going to concentrate on this and its cultivars. The original wild form of peony lactiflora, as its name suggests, is a single white flower. The UK has been a leading country in the development of flower cultivars of the herbaceous peonies. We'll build a display of these cultivars in the Chinese culture garden. This is why they tend to have English names and not Chinese. The cultivars we grow have been chosen to tell another peony story. Some cultivars are developed from pure lactiflora stock and appear close to the original wild form, such as Crinkled White and Alexander Duff. But others have been produced by crossing peony lactiflora with the red peony peregrina from Eastern Europe and Turkey. These two species seem to be fairly genetically compatible, and the result of the lactiflora peregrina cross is a beautiful hybrid called Coral Sunset. Attempts to hybridize peony lactiflora with the yellow peony Moluccaswichii proved much more of a challenge, as they appeared to be much less compatible genetically. It took 7 years or 500 pollination attempts each year to get one successful cross between these two species. You can see the result of these labours in Clair de Lune. More extreme forms of manipulation of the flower have resulted in flower forms far removed from the original wild single peony lactiflora. In these cultivars in the garden, you can see how the outer petals contrast with the central section of the flower itself for dramatic effect. Peonies have been a medicinal plant for much longer than they've been cultural plants. And the two forms of peony you can see here, you can see how the root differs with each. And there are different herbs used for different reasons. Now this tree peony root here, you can see has this particular shape which is typical of it. And if you cut down into it, you see the centre has this very strong anchoring to the root, which is removed. This is just to hold the plant up. It's the root bark that you use for mudan pea. And this is it in dried form. So this is mudan pea. It's actually very aromatic, unlike this one, which is the herbaceous. The herbaceous root, you can see, is much thicker, has no center section to it, because it's a food store, and this is what they rely on in making these Japanese hybrids, where they can use this food store for boosting the top growth. Now this is harvested quite differently. The root is taken off, you see there's no central section, and they scrape off the outer bark. The name Bai Shao, Bai means white and Shao means herb, so this is why it's called Bai Shao. So this is quite a different herb, and they have different uses. The main active chemical in Bai Shao is considered to be the glycoside peniflorin. Its pharmacological action is to dilate the coronary and peripheral blood vessels, relax smooth muscles, and reduce inflammation. It reduces pain and is synergistic with morphine. This matches the traditional use to reduce cramping caused by blood deficiency. Although mudan root does also contain peniflorin, it has also the addition of phenolic compounds such as pianol. This is a strong action in reducing heat, inflammation and pain, and also reducing blood pressure. Again, this matches the traditional use to clear heat from the blood and reduce more severe pain from blood stagnation. Ethnopharmacology is a useful common ground to enable dialogue between Chinese and European thinking, but it doesn't really capture the traditional use of these herbs. Both herbs are anti-inflammatory, used to treat pain, but in the case of Bai Shao, this is due to stiffness in the tendons and muscles due to blood deficiency, while in the case of mudan, the pain is a more severe stabbing pain caused by excess blood stagnation with heat. The cause of the pain is different, and if you use mudan for deficient pain and Bai Shao for excess, it will not help and could even make it worse. You need to use Chinese herbs with traditional diagnosis and not just as a drug for a symptom. Although herbaceous and tree peonies are different species, there's been a lot of effort to try and hybridize the two. There are advantages in doing this. One of the methods might be to take the root of the herbaceous peony and then simply graft on the top of the tree peony. This is exactly what they do to create these lovely Japanese tree peonies. There are no native tree peonies in Japan. They were taken from China by monks to monasteries, and they've created these wonderful varieties. Additionally, they took them for medicinal use in the 8th century. By grafting the top of the tree peony onto herbaceous root, you can boost the growth of the tree peony top. It's like a burst of steroids, making the top flower in a few years. Slowly, the plant will start to produce true tree peony roots. The blooms on the Japanese peonies are very large. In Japan, the emphasis is on single and anemone doubles. There are no flares in Japanese peonies, meaning there's no rocky eye influence, as in the Gansu Mudan. We have two examples of Japanese tree peonies here in the garden. The first is this dramatic pink anemone form, Akashigata. And the second cultivar is Shimane Hakugan. Shimane Hakugan is a pure white form appreciated for its beauty when the light shines through from behind. A second method to produce a cross between the tree and herbaceous peony is theoretically to transfer pollen to create a true genetic hybrid. We saw how this was done to produce hybrids between different herbaceous peonies with varied success. But to cross-pollinate between tree and herbaceous peonies means crossing a much greater genetic barrier. In fact, it was thought to be impossible until Toichi Aito succeeded in 1948 to produce what was a genuine pollinated hybrid. He used the yellow hybrids of Delave that we saw earlier. This creation of new cultivars of Delave to create yellow peonies such as L'Espérance and Alice Harding were achieved in France in 1909. They created a new chapter in the story of Chinese tree peonies outside China itself. These appear to be more genetically compatible with herbaceous peonies. Toichi Aito used the pollen of the tree peony Alice Harding to fertilize the Japanese herbaceous peony Hakuden. After 1,200 attempts, he succeeded in producing a true hybrid. Aito died in 1956 and never saw them flower, but his work was continued by peony breeders in America. The American peony breeder Anderson continued Aito's work to create a similar but improved hybrid named Bartzella. The original price of Bartzella was $1,000. Aito hybrids are still an expensive peony, as they can only be reproduced through the slow process of root division. In honour of his achievement, this became known as Aito hybrids, but they are better known now as intersectional hybrids. The price of Bartzella has come down a lot since then, and we have this example in sectional and intersectional hybrids. There's some confusion as to whether these are actually tree or herbaceous peonies have their own classification. The top flower like a tree peony, but the roots more like a herbaceous peony, and they die back in winter. Because of the more vigorous root system, they flower longer and can flower twice a year if cut back. Chinese peonies are very short flowering. Whilst the majority of Aito hybrids are yellow, new colours are appearing. Another in our collection, again from the American breeder Anderson, is this semi-double lavender first arrival. Anderson himself was surprised by the sudden appearance of a new colour. It also has a rose fragrance. Although the far southwest of China may not be suitable for the Peonies fructicosa Mudan peonies, it is famous for another species which is very important in Chinese culture, the camellia. It's the local flower of Yunnan province. Yunnan's a very inaccessible area, so we didn't really see this plant in the West until 1820, which is about 200 years after the peony. This is Camellia reticulata, the local species for the southwest of China. Like the tree peony, it arrived by way of the port of Guangzhou. It was a double pink form, which they called Captain Reeves after the sea captain. In China, it's known as Guixia, which means returning rosy clouds. If you go to the east of China, you find they're growing another species, Camellia japonica, They're not sure if this is native to that part of China or imported from Japan, but we know that over 80% of all camellias grown are this particular variety. In fact, most of all of them in the UK are Camellia japonica. Camellia japonica flowers in early spring, so early it can appear when there's still snow on the ground. You will often see these camellias in paintings blooming in the snow to symbolize spring. It's a common gift in the Chinese New Year. In central China there's another camellia called Camellia oleifera. This is a specialist shade-loving camellia used by garden designers in the UK. But in central China it's grown not for its flower, but for an oil extracted from the seeds. All camellias produce a large seed like this. In the oleifera species they are larger and more numerous. It's what's inside the seed that gives the name oleifera, meaning oil flower. When you open the camellia seed, you can see it contains a jelly-like oil. This oil is extracted and refined and used as a cooking oil in this part of China. Its useful properties compared to other vegetable oils, as it can reach a high temperature before burning. In Japan, camellia oil is also a valuable cosmetic oil. It's a light oil with a low molecular size, which makes it absorb quickly. It's used to moisturize skin and for the treatment of burns. The centerpiece of this garden is this species, Camellia sinensis. This is the species used to make tea. There are many cultivars used to make tea. In the 1980s in China, there were 2,700 different cultivars recorded. Many were very local. 22 were selected as the best and given priority for large-scale cultivation. The main division in cultivars is between Camellia sinensis variety sinensis, which has small leaves. These are used for the aromatic white and green teas. The other is Camellia sinensis variety Assamica, which has larger leaves. It's more commonly grown in the West and used for black teas. The variety we're growing here is Assamica. All camellias require an acid soil, and 20 tons of acid soil imported from East Anglia was used to make these tea terraces. Although it may not be the most decorative camellia, Camellia sinensis does produce a small typical camellia flower in spring, but it's normally suppressed by constant picking, which encourages new leaf buds. Our image of growing tea is as low terraces, and we will be growing our tea to match this. But it is a modern method. In the wild, Camellia sinensis grows as a small tree, and we are going to allow one of these to grow into a tree. The reason is that ancient teas in China were collected from mature trees. Early teas used old mature trees. The leaves had to be collected using ladders. The older the tree, the more valuable was the tea produced. Originally, tea was a medicinal herb, and older trees had deeper roots which gathered more minerals, making them medicinally superior. The main centre in Yunnan for the origin of tea was a town named Pu'er, and here they still produce what is known as Pu'er tea. This is Pu'er tea. It doesn't look like the tea we're used to. It's in a hard tablet form. They also press in the maker. Now these are made by taking leaves from mature trees, steaming them and compressing them into tablets. This part of China is subtropical, and the natural damp heat encourages fungal growth. Instead of trying to stop the fungal contamination, it's encouraged, like making cheese. Many years can pass before it's deemed mature. A naturally fermented Pu'er tea is known as Sheng Pu'er, and a 50-year-old Sheng Pu'er can be very expensive, like a vintage wine. The shapes of Pu'er blocks also differ, and they have their own history. These shapes and weights reflect the history of Pu'er tea as a currency, and were used for trade on the tea road. The tea road is less well known than the Silk Road, but like the Silk Road, it was started during the expansion of the Tang dynasty. The origin of the tea road was at Pu'er. Then it travelled up into the Tibetan plateau to Lhasa. There it was traded for horses, which were used to build the Chinese cavalry army. For this reason, it's often called the Tea Horse Road. The round journey to Lhasa in Tibet took a full year and was very arduous. This photo of the tea road was taken by the plant explorer Ernest Wilson in 1908. The Pu'er tea blocks you can see being carried come in different shapes. These are flat tablets, making it easier to pack onto a person or a horse. They came in weights from 500 grams to 1 kilo. This special pumpkin form was used for tributes to the Qing emperors. They were made of the highest quality tea. Largest versions were known as human head pu'er, and they were presented to the emperor as though they were the severed head of their enemies. Pu'er tea has now become popular in the West as a health drink. You can now buy it in easy-to-use forms. The taste is very strong and earthy depending on the source of the plants and microbial strain. It's a tonic for weak digestion and is said to cleanse the blood and reduce cholesterol. During the Tang dynasty, tea drinking became more of a social drink, initially by the emperor and court officials, and later by the general population. While it was still recognised as medicinal in nature, a pleasant taste became more important. How much of the growing tip is picked has an effect on the quality and taste of the tea. In this variety, the growing tip is smooth. Sometimes the growing tip is removed with the first leaf. This is known as imperial quality to mark its use in the imperial court. This is the most common quality, known as fine. It includes the shoot and 2 leaves. Unlike white tea, you can pick this as a first flush in spring and then again as a second flush when the tips regrow. For some teas and regions, you may take a third flush picking in the autumn. The taste of each flush is different. This is white tea from Fujian region. It's made with just the growing tip, giving it the name as silver needle tea. It's seen as the highest quality tea and in the past reserved only for the emperor. White tea is only picked once a year, unlike other teas which have several pickings. The silver colour is because the tip of this variety is covered with hairs. It is this that gives it the name of pekoe tea. Pekoe literally means covered with soft hairs. When you look at the growing tip of white teas in close detail, you can see the hairs. These have a high content of aromatic essential oils. The oils create a light, fragrant tea. Essential oils have a mood-altering action. White teas are calming teas as they have low caffeine levels. To preserve the oils, the leaves are dried slowly and undamaged. You can see the aromatic essential oils floating on the surface of this white tea. The tea is only brewed at 80 degrees for 2 to 3 minutes to preserve the oils. Green teas are simply dried leaves, and like white tea, they are treated with care. The leaves are not damaged and dried slowly to capture the original chemistry as much as possible. This is a green tea known as Yellow Mountain Cloud and Mist tea. The Yellow Mountains in Anhui province are famous for green teas. This tea is grown at 800 meters on mineral-rich soil, and they're often covered in mist to give it the name Cloud and Mist tea. The tea is rich in vitamins, minerals and tannins which give a unique flavour. Green tea has a cooling effect on the body. Of all the tea varieties, green tea is the highest in antioxidant polyphenols. These are linked to health by reducing free radicals. Green tea also contains several vitamins, amino acids and minerals contributing to its health properties. For white and green teas, it's important not to damage the leaves at all. If you damage the leaves, it produces chemicals, stress chemicals, and starts a process called oxidation. Now for some teas this is important. Oolong teas, black teas, they require that you damage the leaves and start the process of oxidation. Oxidation means new chemicals means new flavours. These are the oolong teas. The name oolong means rolled, and you can see the leaves have been rolled up. Oolong teas have been lightly oxidized, but the leaves can be oxidized for different times. For instance, this famous Iron Buddha tea is lightly oxidized for a few hours only, but this darker oolong tea has been oxidized for longer, giving it a darker colour. For black tea that we drink in this country with milk, the damaged leaves are allowed to oxidize for about 12 hours under a warm, damp cloth in a room about 22 degrees. This produces a black coloured tea with the burnt sweet taste typical of the Chinese black teas. In China this is called a red tea due to the colour of the liquid. This example is from Yingde in Guangdong province. It was the favourite tea of our Queen Elizabeth. She visited the tea plantation in 1959 and hence it's now sold under this name. Black tea is less cooling and more stimulant than green tea. This is because in green tea the caffeine is bound to tannins, making it slow to release. The oxidation process in making black tea frees the bonds, causing higher caffeine levels and a more immediate stimulant. Vitamins are also reduced in the creation of black tea. In the tea garden here in Bristol, we're growing 2 different varieties of tea, chosen because they're more suited to our relatively cold climate. The first is from Nepal and the other is from Georgia next to Russia. This is a Georgian tea processed to make a black tea. The taste is quite aromatic, almost like a dark oolong. It's not been heavily oxidized. I'd be happy to drink this tea, but we'll have to wait and see if our tea grown in the garden is drinkable. The final taste of any tea depends on many variables apart from the variety and processing. The chemistry of tea has been studied in great detail. It's affected not just by the variety cultivated or its processing through oxidation or fermentation. All teas reflect their environment, such as the soil, as in wine. But another unexpected variable is the amount of stress the plant is subjected to. Plants react to stress by producing a wide range of chemicals, known as secondary metabolites. These stress chemicals affect both the taste and the medicinal effect. Tea is normally grown at high altitude between 700 to 1500 meters and often quite poor stony soil. The plant is exposed to higher UV light and more extreme weather at altitude. Even the mist can play a part in developing flavour as the plant adapts to climatic fluctuations. So, when we grow these teas in the lowland areas here in Bristol, they may not be subject to stress and therefore don't create these extra flavours that come from metabolites. This is true of many of the medicinal plants in the Chinese herb garden also. They are mountain plants and often we rely on these secondary metabolites for medicinal action. Being able to grow the plant is one thing, but to produce a good medicinal product is another. We can view the Chinese culture garden on several levels. On one level is the symbolic use of plants within China. On a slightly deeper level is their medicinal use, which goes back further in history. But the deepest level is in the plants themselves, their evolution, and their chemistry, and how we use them. The Chinese Herb and Culture Garden is the result of a collaboration between the University of Bristol Botanic Garden and the Register of Chinese Herbal Medicine. Thank you for watching. If you want to learn more about the Chinese garden, please visit the following websites.